An architect haunted by grief returns to his cursed coastal hometown, where buildings collapse when love dies. Amid ruins and legends, Luca Moretti meets Alina, a gardener healing from loss. Together they rebuild the town and, their hearts proving that love can outlast even ruin itself.
The bus hissed to a stop along the narrow coastal road, its brakes groaning against the steep incline. Luca Moretti stepped down onto the cracked cobblestone street, his boots stirring up a fine cloud of dust that hung like a veil over the town. The salty breeze from the sea tangled in his dark hair, now flecked with streaks of grey, carrying with it the faint scent of brine and forgotten days. He inhaled deeply, a mix of nostalgia and sorrow washing over him as his gaze swept over the familiar yet broken landscape. The town, once alive with laughter and the joyful clamour of festivals, now lay silent and fractured. Walls that had stood for centuries were reduced to heaps of rubble, their stones scattered like the memories of loves lost. Windows gaped open like empty eye sockets, doors hung crooked on their hinges, and roofs sagged under the weight of time and heartbreak. Luca's heart tightened at the sight, a mirror to the emptiness he felt within since the death of his wife. His steps echoed softly as he wandered down the narrow streets, each corner revealing another ruin, another story of love that had ended in pain. The curse, a whispered legend he had long dismissed during his years away, now pressed upon him with undeniable weight. Here, in this coastal town, buildings crumbled whenever a love ended, as if the very stones themselves mourned the broken vows and shattered promises. Passing the remains of his childhood home, Luca paused. The garden where he had once played as a boy was now overgrown with weeds and wildflowers, nature reclaiming what man had built. His fingers brushed against a fallen beam, rough and splintered, and memories surged forward: his mother's laughter, his father's stern but loving gaze, the warmth of his wife's hand in his. Grief tightened its grip, but beneath it stirred a flicker of determination. He remembered the day he left the town, chasing a dream of architectural acclaim far from these shores. He had thought distance might dull his pain, but it had only sharpened the ache. Now, faced with the ruins of both home and heart, he knew he could not turn away. The town needed him, and perhaps, in rebuilding its broken walls, he might find a way to mend his own. As twilight deepened, Luca found himself drawn toward the old chapel at the edge of the village, its spire fractured and leaning precariously toward the turbulent sea. It was here years ago that he had exchanged vows with his wife, promises that had been cruelly cut short by illness. He knelt before the fallen altar, the sound of waves crashing against the cliffs below mingling with the echo of his whispered vow. "I will rebuild this town," he said softly, "and in doing so, I will rebuild the hope that love can endure." The wind seemed to answer with a mournful sigh, stirring the dust into swirling patterns around him. The curse was real, a heavy, invisible force that bound the fate of every stone and soul in the town. But Luca was resolved. The architect of broken vows would become the architect of new beginnings. Night fell, and with it came the quiet hum of the sea and the faint flicker of lanterns in distant windows. Luca lingered a moment longer, eyes lifted to the stars shimmering above, fragile yet steadfast. Somewhere deep inside, a fragile seed of hope took root, ready to grow amidst the ruins. This was only the beginning. The road ahead would be long and fraught with pain. But Luca Moretti was prepared to face it, to confront the ghosts of the past and the weight of the curse alike. For in the heart of ruin, love's true architecture awaited its chance to rise again. The coastal town held its breath, the fragile balance between love and loss suspended in the cool night air. Luca's footsteps carried him forward, toward the promise of rebuilding what was shattered, toward a future where broken vows might find their redemption. And as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky with hues of rose and gold, Luca knew that he had come home not just to a town in ruins, but to the possibility of healing and hope. The salty air clung to Luca Moretti's skin as he stepped cautiously through the ruins of his childhood home, now reduced to a tangle of shattered stone and splintered wood. The familiar coastal breeze carried with it the faint scent of brine and seaweed, but beneath that, a heavier, almost suffocating presence lingered, the invisible weight of the town's curse. It was a burden he had come to know intimately in the days since his return, a spectral reminder that every fallen building told a story of love lost, a promise broken, a heart left aching in the ruins. He paused beside a collapsed wall, his fingers brushing over the rough edges of the broken masonry. The texture was cold and unforgiving, but the memories it brought forth were vivid and warm. Here, in the space where laughter had once echoed, his wife had stood, her smile like sunlight filtering through olive branches. Now all that remained were echoes, ghosts of joy mingled with the raw sting of absence. Luca's deep-set eyes, shadowed by grief and sleepless nights, scanned the devastation. The church bells rang out in the distance, their mournful chimes weaving through the narrow streets like a lament. He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his vow settle firmly within him. He would rebuild. Not only the crumbling walls of the town, but the shattered hearts of its people and perhaps his own as well. Retreating to a small room in the local inn that had once been his mother's, Luca set up a makeshift studio. The wooden table groaned under the weight of yellowed blueprints and sketchbooks, the edges curled and stained by time and neglect. Candlelight flickered against the peeling plaster walls, casting dancing shadows that seemed to breathe with a life of their own. The silence was thick, broken only by the soft scratch of his pencil as it traced tentative lines across the paper. Each stroke was a tentative step forward, a blueprint, not just for buildings, but for hope. Luca sketched the outlines of homes rebuilt stronger, more resilient, yet still infused with the warmth and soul of the town's heritage. He imagined courtyards blooming with jasmine, windows open to the sea breeze, walls that would hold stories of love and life for generations to come. But even as he worked, the oppressive presence of the curse pressed close. A sudden gust rattled the fragile window panes, sending a cascade of dust motes swirling in the candlelight. Luca paused, closing his eyes and drawing in a shaky breath. He could feel it, the invisible force that crept through the empty streets, the shadow that clung to every cracked surface. It was the weight of heartbreak made manifest, a reminder that the town's pain was far from healed. Memories surged unbidden, his wife's laughter, as they walked along this very coast, the soft brush of her hand against his, the promise of forever whispered beneath the stars. Those moments felt achingly close yet impossibly distant, like a melody half remembered. The curse was not only the town's burden. It was his own, a chain forged from grief and fear. Determined not to let despair take root, Luca rose and stepped outside as twilight blid across the horizon. The sky was a canvas of pink and purple, the sun dipping behind the jagged cliffs that cradled the town. Waves crashed rhythmically against the shore, a steady heartbeat beneath the fragile silence. He walked slowly, the coarse sand cool beneath his worn boots, letting the sound and the setting fill the atching spaces within him. His thoughts drifted to the future, uncertain, fragile, but shimmering with possibility. He would need to summon every ounce of strength and compassion to face the challenges ahead. The curse was real, but so was the resilience woven into the people who called this place home. As darkness settled, Luca returned to his drawings, the pencil now moving with a steadier hand. Each line was a promise to the town, to the memories, to the love that had shaped him. In the quiet scratch of graphite against paper, he found a fragile hope taking shape. The road to healing would be long and steep, but it had begun. Outside, the wind whispered through the broken streets, carrying with it the faintest hint of renewal. Somewhere beyond the ruins, a new chapter waited to be written. The wind carried a cool, briny tang as Luca Moretti stepped cautiously over the uneven cobblestones, his eyes tracing the jagged outlines of collapsed rooftops and shattered walls. The coastal town he had once called home was a skeleton of its former self, each ruin a silent testament to love lost and heartbreak endured. Luca's steps slowed as he approached a small patch of unexpected color, a garden thriving defiantly beside the wreckage of a once proud house. There, amidst the wildflowers and herbs, knelt a woman with curly auburn hair, her hands gently coaxing life from the soil. Her green eyes flicked up, meeting his gaze with a mixture of surprise and guarded curiosity. For a moment, the weight of the crumbling world around them softened, replaced by the fragile bloom of human connection. "I don't often see new faces here," she said, her voice warm yet cautious, carrying the soft lilt of the town's coastal breeze. Luca nodded, clearing his throat. "Just returned. I'm Luca Moretti. I'm trying to help rebuild." His words felt heavy, laden not just with his architectural mission, but with the invisible burden of loss that shadowed him. Elena's lips curved in a tentative smile. "Elena Rossi, this garden is my way of holding on and letting go." She gestured to the plants, their vibrant greens and purples stark against the grey ruins. Their conversation began with careful steps, each hesitant to reveal too much of the pain they carried. Elena spoke of her funk lost tragically and the loneliness that followed. Luca confessed the death of his wife, the grief that had driven him back to the town and its haunted streets. Despite their guarded words, an unspoken understanding wove between them, a shared recognition of what it meant to live in a place where love's end could bring ruin not only to hearts but to homes. The curse they both felt was palpable, a heavy presence that hung in the salty air. The sea's distant roar underscored their silence, waves crashing rhythmically as if echoing the tumult within their souls. Luca found himself sketching the garden and ruins in his notebook, each line a tentative reach toward hope amid despair. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of rose and gold, Luca and Elena lingered in the quiet space between words and glances. In that fragile moment, surrounded by decay and growth, they sensed the possibility of something new, a bond that might withstand the curse's shadow. But both knew the journey ahead would be fraught with doubt and fear. To rebuild the town was to rebuild themselves, brick by fragile brick, heart by guarded heart. The first meeting was just the beginning, a soft murmur of hope in a town held hostage by heartbreak. As Luca closed his notebook, the last light of day fading, a thought settled in his mind. Perhaps amidst the ruins, love could yet find a way to endure. And with that thought came the first flicker of resolve to face the shadows of the past and step into the uncertain promise of tomorrow. The morning light spilled softly over the crumbled rooftops of the coastal town, casting long shadows that stretched across the broken stone and scattered debris. Luca Moretti stepped carefully through the ruins of what had once been a proud home, his boots crunching against shards of tiles and fallen bricks. Beside him, Elena Rossi moved with a quiet grace, her eyes scanning the wreckage as she breathed in the salty air, now tinged with the scent of damp earth and seaweed. "This was the Bellini house," Elena said softly, her voice almost lost in the whisper of the breeze. "They say the couple who lived here were torn apart by jealousy and silence. The walls crumbled the day their love died." Luca knelt, running his fingers over a splintered beam, feeling the rough texture beneath his skin. "It's as if the town itself remembers every heartbreak," he murmured, his gaze distant but filled with reverence. "Each ruin carries a story, a wound etched into every stone." Elena nodded, her green eyes glistening. "That's what makes it so heavy here. The curse isn't just in the collapsing buildings, it's in the memories they hold, the sorrow they echo." They wandered deeper into the labyrinth of ruins, their footsteps stirring clouds of dust and fragments of lives long past. At the edge of the village square, Luca stopped before the remains of a grand old chapel. The facade was cracked and worn, vines creeping over the stone like veins reclaiming flesh. Elena reached out, her fingers brushing the cold surface, tracing the jagged lines that marred the once pristine walls. "This is where Isabella and Marco were supposed to be married," she whispered, her voice thick with grief. "But Marco left, afraid to commit, and Isabella waited alone until the walls fell around her. Luca's eyes met hers, and in that moment, the weight of their collective heart-ache settled between them. "It's not just buildings breaking," he said quietly. "It's the people inside, their hopes and fears crumbling alongside the stone." The afternoon sun warmed the ruins as they moved on, Luca pulling out a worn sketchbook from his bag. With practiced strokes, he began to capture the jagged lines of the fallen homes, each sketch a testament to the lives once lived within. Alina watched him, a soft smile touching her lips despite the sadness that lingered in the air. "You see more than just broken walls," she said. "You see the possibilities, the chance to rebuild, to heal." Luca looked up, meeting her gaze with a flicker of something long buried beneath his grief, hope. "Together," he said, "we can give these stories a new chapter." As the sun dipped lower, casting an amber glow over the shattered village, they paused on a narrow street lined with skeletal remains of houses that had once echoed with laughter and love. The silence was profound, yet it spoke volumes of loss, resilience, and the fragile beauty of second chances. "Do you think the curse can be broken?" Elena asked, her voice barely more than a breath. Luca's eyes darkened with determination. "If love is the root of the ruin, then love must be the foundation we build upon." Hand in hand, they stood amidst the ruins, the fading light wrapping them in a quiet promise. The journey ahead was uncertain, fraught with pain and fear, but also with the possibility of renewal. And as the stars began to twinkle above the collapsing village, the first stirrings of hope took root in the hearts of two souls determined to rewrite the story of their broken town. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the narrow cobblestone streets of the coastal town, where time seemed to linger stubbornly between the cracks of crumbled walls and faded shutters. Luca Moretti moved with a quiet resolve, his footsteps echoing softly against the stones he had once run over as a boy. His dark hair, now streaked with silver, caught the light as he adjusted the strap of his worn leather satchel. Each breath he took was heavy with salt and the faint scent of wild herbs that grew along the cliffs. The town, fragile and scarred, seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. He approached the small building that housed the town's historical archive, a modest structure nestled between the remnants of old shops and a crumbling fountain. The wooden door, weathered by years of sea air and neglect, creaked open under his touch. Inside, the air was thick with the musk of aged paper and dust, a comforting scent that transported Luca back to childhood afternoons spent poring over local legends with his grandfather. Marco Vitel was there waiting, as if no time had passed since their last meeting. His stocky frame filled the small room, the salt and pepper hair atop his head tousled from a morning spent outdoors. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, softened as he saw Luca enter. "You made it," Marco greeted, his voice a warm rumble that carried the familiarity of shared history. Luca returned the smile, hesitant but genuine. "I wouldn't miss it. There's too much to understand now." The room was cluttered with stacks of brittle books, yellowed maps, and faded photographs that whispered stories of a town both beautiful and broken. Marco gestured toward a wooden table piled high with documents. "I thought you'd want to start here. These are records collected over decades, some going back centuries." Luca ran his fingers over the rough covers, feeling the weight of the past in his hands. "The curse," he whispered, more to himself than to Marco. "I need to know where it began." With a solemn nod, Marco carefully extracted a fragile manuscript from the pile. Its edges were frayed, the ink faded, but the story it contained was vivid and haunting. They sat side by side, the soft glow of a single lamp casting a warm pool of light over the fragile pages. As Marco read aloud, the tale unfolded, a century-old love story marked by passion and betrayal, where two souls bound by promise were torn apart by jealousy and tragedy. The heartbreak had seeped into the town's very foundations, manifesting as a curse that caused buildings to collapse whenever love ended. Each ruin was a monument to lost hopes and fractured hearts. Luca listened, the weight of the story settling deep within him. He saw himself mirrored in the tale: the loss of love, the fear of moving forward, the desperate hope for redemption. It was more than legend. It was an emotional architecture that mapped the scars of every resident, including himself. When the story finished, silence enveloped them. Outside, the distant crashing of waves against the cliffs punctuated the stillness, a reminder of nature's relentless rhythm. Marco broke the quiet. "We have to rebuild not just the buildings, but the town's spirit." Luca nodded, determination flickering in his eyes. If the curse is born of heartbreak, maybe healing it requires more than mortar and stone. Maybe it needs us to rebuild trust and hope. They stepped outside into the cool sea breeze, salty and fresh, carrying the faint fragrance of wildflowers blooming against the weathered stone. From their vantage point atop the cliff, the town lay sprawled beneath them, its patchwork of ruins and resilient homes a testament to survival. As they spoke of plans and possibilities, a sudden tremor shuddered through the ground beneath their feet. A nearby ancient wall, already weakened by time and neglect, crumbled slightly, sending a small cloud of dust into the air. The reminder was stark and sobering: the town's fragility was real, and the stakes were high. But so was their resolve. Luca looked toward the horizon, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of gold and rose. The story of the town, its curse, and its people was far from over. Together with Marco and soon others, he would lay the foundations not only for rebuilt homes, but for a future where love could endure beyond heartbreak. The path ahead was uncertain, but Luca felt a flicker of something he had not known in a long time: hope. And with hope came the strength to face the challenges that awaited. As darkness settled, Luca lingered on the cliff's edge, the wind tugging gently at his coat. Somewhere deep inside, a vow took shape: not just to restore the town's buildings, but to rebuild the broken vows of its people, starting with his own. The night held its breath, waiting to see if this small, resilient town would rise from its ruins or be swallowed once more by the shadows of lost love. And Luca was ready to fight for its future. The morning sun spilled gently over the terracotta rooftops, casting a golden glow across the coastal town. Luca Moretti followed Elena Rossi through the narrow cobblestone streets, the scent of salt and sea mingling with the faint fragrance of blooming flowers. They reached a small gate entwined with climbing roses, and Elena paused, turning the latch with a quiet smile. Beyond the gate lay Elena's garden, a vibrant patchwork of greens and blossoms, nestled against the backdrop of the blue Mediterranean. The garden was a sanctuary of color and life amidst the crumbling stone of the town. Sunlight filtered through the leaves of olive trees, dappling the ground with patterns that danced with the gentle breeze. "It's my refuge," Elena said softly, her voice blending with the rustling leaves. "A place where I can heal, where life keeps growing even when everything else feels broken." Luca inhaled deeply, the crisp air filled with rosemary, thyme, and lavender. The garden was alive with the hum of bees and the distant call of gulls. Here, the weight of the town's curse seemed to lessen, replaced by the quiet promise of renewal. They walked side by side along narrow paths bordered by wildflowers and neatly tended beds. Elena paused near a small plot where tender green shoots broke through the dark soil. "These are seeds I planted last week," she said, kneeling down to brush the earth. "Each one is a hope, a chance for something new to take root." Luca crouched beside her, his fingers tracing the rich soil. The sensation was grounding, a simple connection to the earth that contrasted with the heaviness he carried in his chest. "It's beautiful," he murmured, eyes meeting hers. Like the town itself, Elena's gaze softened, but a flicker of hesitation lingered in her eyes. "The town's wounds run deep, Luca. Sometimes I wonder if even the strongest roots can hold when the storms come." He nodded slowly, understanding the weight behind her words. Both bore scars visible and invisible that the curse had etched into their lives. Yet here, amidst the tender shoots and blooming petals, there was a fragile hope. A sudden gust of wind swept through the garden, stirring petals from a nearby jasmine bush. They floated through the air like fragile promises, swirling around Luca and Alina. For a moment, time seemed to slow as they stood silently, the unspoken fears and hopes between them hanging in the air like the blossoms. "I've learned to tend this garden," Elena continued, "because it teaches me patience. Healing isn't quick or easy, it takes time and care. Sometimes you have to let go of what's dead and nurture what's still alive." Luca's eyes drifted to the horizon, where the sea met the sky in a seamless line of blue. He felt the weight of his own grief, the loss of his wife, and the fear that love might only bring ruin. Yet Elena's words stirred something tentative within him. "Maybe," he said quietly, "we can learn to rebuild more than just stone and mortar. Maybe we can rebuild what's inside us too." Alina smiled, a genuine warmth that reached her eyes. "That's why I wanted you to see this place. Because healing is hard, but not impossible. And sometimes it starts with a single seed." They spent the morning working side by side, planting new seeds and clearing away the remnants of last season's growth. Alina shared stories of her family's struggles, the loss of her fiancé, the resilience it took to stay and care for her loved ones. Luca listened, the barriers around his heart beginning to soften. As the sun climbed higher, the garden seemed to breathe with them, a living testament to endurance and hope. The scent of earth and flowers filled the air, mingling with the quiet murmur of waves crashing against the cliffs beyond. When they finally stood to leave, Luca looked around once more, feeling a flicker of something he hadn't dared to hope for in a long time, a beginning. "Thank you," he said, meeting Elena's gaze, "for sharing this with me. We were both planting seeds," she replied, "in the garden and in ourselves. Let's see what grows." As they walked back through the winding streets, the sun warmed their backs. The town's curse still loomed, an invisible weight pressing against their fragile hopes. But in the quiet corners of a small garden, two wounded souls had found the courage to start anew, nurturing seeds of hope that might one day blossom into something unbreakable. And as the afternoon light faded to dusk, Luca couldn't help but wonder, could love, like a garden, be tended back to life even after the harshest winters? The question lingered, a gentle whisper against the crashing waves. Would they dare to find out? The coastal wind whispered mournfully through the narrow alleys of the town, carrying with it the scent of salt and seaweed, a constant reminder of the place Luca Moretti had left behind and now was compelled to return to. The evening sun dipped toward the horizon, casting elongated shadows that seemed to stretch and shudder with every faint tremor beneath his feet. Luca stood before the skeletal frame of what had once been a proud home, his hands resting on the rough timber, as if drawing strength from the weathered wood. Yet inside, a tempest brewed, fierce and unyielding. He pulled his jacket tighter around him, the chill biting deeper than the coastal breeze. His eyes, deep-set and shadowed, traced the fractured lines of the wall, the cracks like scars etched by sorrow and betrayal. The curse, that invisible weight borne by the town, pressed heavily on his chest. To him, it was more than superstition. It was a tangible force, a reflection of every broken promise and shattered heart that had ever lived here. Inside his small studio, the soft glow of a single lamp illuminated a desk cluttered with blueprints and sketches. Luca's pencil hovered uncertainly over a fresh sheet of parchment, the lines he drew wavering as if unsure whether to hold together or crumble. The image was of a new house, strong and resilient. But his hand trembled with the memory of the last home he had designed with his wife, a home that now existed only in his mind and in the ruins outside. He closed his eyes briefly, the ghost of her laughter a bittersweet melody that haunted his every thought. Is it folly, he wondered silently, to build again when the heart is still so fragile? Each stroke of the pencil was a battle between the desire to move forward and the fear of losing everything once more. Meanwhile, across town, Elena Rossi moved quietly through her garden, the earth soft beneath her fingers as she reached to prune a wilting rose. The plant's petals, once vibrant, now curled and browned at the edges, a mirror of her own bruised heart. The garden was her sanctuary, a place where she nurtured not just flowers but fragile hopes of healing. Yet as the sea breeze stirred the leaves, it carried with it the weight of memories she longed to forget. Her gaze lingered on the rose, a symbol of love that had withered before it could fully bloom. The loss of her fiancé, a tragedy that had left her trembling at the brink of hope and despair, was a silent wound she guarded fiercely. Opening up meant risking that pain anew. A sudden shudder ran through the earth, subtle but unmistakable. Elena's breath caught as she looked up toward the center of town, where Luca was surely working. The curse was restless tonight. The ground whispered warnings, and the buildings, even those newly rebuilt, quivered as though trembling with fear. Elsewhere, Marco Vital stood beside Luca near the base of a half-restored wall. The older man's salt and pepper hair caught the dying light, his stout frame steady against the ominous tremors shaking the stones. His eyes, sharp and thoughtful, met Luca's with a mixture of concern and resolve. "It's growing stronger," Marco murmured, his voice low. "The curse feeds on the pain and fear. If we don't find a way to break its hold, it will tear this town apart, and perhaps more than the buildings." Luca nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Then we must be stronger, for the town, for ourselves." Back in the warmth of Sofia Bellini's cafe, the gentle clinking of cups and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee offered a stark contrast to the night's uneasy atmosphere. Sofia, petite with silver hair framing her kind face, poured a cup with practiced grace. Her bright scarves swirled like flames around her shoulders, a symbol of light in the darkness. She watched Luca and Elena seated near the window, their faces etched with worry and guarded hope. "You both carry heavy burdens," she said softly, "but real love is the strongest foundation there is. It can heal even the deepest wounds." Elena looked up, her green eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "But what if the past keeps pulling us under?" Sofia smiled gently. "Then you hold on to each other. Build something new together." The words settled over the two like a fragile promise. Yet outside, the earth's tremors grew more insistent, shaking dust from the fragile walls Luca had so painstakingly raised. The curse was a beast awakened, sensing the vulnerability beneath their tentative hope. That night, as the town lay under a blanket of stars, Luca found himself pacing the narrow streets, the weight of his grief a heavy shroud. Memories of his wife, her smile, her touch, the sound of her voice echoed through the empty alleys. He stopped before the ruins of their home, fingers tracing the cracked stone where love had once lived. "I'm afraid," he admitted to the silence, "that if I open my heart again, it will shatter like this town." A soft rustling behind him made him turn. Elena stood there, her eyes reflecting his own fear and longing. "We don't have to be afraid alone," she whispered. "Maybe if we build something together, not just walls, but trust, we can break this curse." For a moment, the tremors ceased, as if the earth itself held its breath. Then slowly, a fragile hope began to take root, fragile as a seedling pushing through cracked stone. But the night was still young, and the foundations of fear ran deep. The question lingered in the air: could love truly triumph over ruin, or was the curse destined to claim them all? As dawn approached, Luca and Elena stood side by side, gazing out toward the restless sea, hearts pounding with uncertainty and the faintest spark of hope. The journey ahead was daunting, but for the first time in a long while, they dared to dream of a future built on more than broken vows and shattered walls. The sky had thickened to a slate gray by mid-afternoon, and the first soft patter of rain against cobblestones echoed like a whispered warning through the narrow streets of the coastal town. Luca Moretti and Elena Rossi found themselves stepping into the warm embrace of Sofia Bellini's cafe, a bright beacon of color and life amid the damp gloom that hung heavy over the community. The cafe's wooden door creaked softly behind them, shutting out the chill and the growing unease that seemed to seep from the sky itself. Inside, the scent of rich espresso and freshly baked pastries wove through the air, wrapping around them like a comforting shawl. The cafe was alive with the low hum of conversation, punctuated by the occasional clink of china and the soft laughter of familiar faces seeking refuge from the storm, brewing both outside and within their hearts. Sophia, with her silver hair pinned back and her bright scarves a cheerful contrast to the grey day, greeted them with a warm smile that seemed to hold the promise of hope. "You both look like you could use a good cup of coffee," Sophia said, her voice gentle but steady, a balm to the frayed nerves of the two who had returned to a town unraveling at the seams. "This storm is more than sky and sea today. It's in the hearts of all of us." Luca nodded, his deep-set eyes shadowed with fatigue but softened by the kindness surrounding him. "It feels like the curse is tightening its grip," he admitted, glancing toward the window, where rain blurred the outlines of fallen roofs and fractured walls. Elena pulled her shawl tighter, her gaze distant yet focused. "The buildings aren't the only things crumbling," she whispered. "We all carry cracks, wounds that the rain can't wash away." Sophia poured their coffees with practiced ease, the rich aroma filling the small space between them. "That's why we gather here," she said softly. "Not just to drink coffee, but to hold on to each other. To remind ourselves that even in ruin, we were not alone." As the afternoon deepened into evening, the cafe became a sanctuary for many. Townsfolk drifted in, some carrying the wariness of loss, others harboring fresh fears as word spread of the approaching storm. Their voices, though tinged with anxiety, wove together stories of hope and resilience, memories of love lost and love yet to come. It was here, amid the warm glow of lamplight and the hum of quiet support, that Luca and Elena began to see their mission in a new light. Their work was no longer just about bricks and mortar. It was about mending the invisible fractures in the town's spirit, about rebuilding lives as much as buildings. Together, they shared their fears and dreams in hushed conversations, the flicker of candlelight illuminating the cautious hope in their eyes. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming a steady rhythm on the cafe's roof, while the wind carried the distant roar of the restless sea. The storm was coming, fierce and unrelenting, threatening to undo the fragile progress made in the town's restoration. And yet, inside the walls of Sophia's cafe, a different storm was gathering, the storm of courage and community, of hearts daring to beat anew against the shadow of the curse. Later that evening, as the rain eased to a steady drizzle, Luca and Elena stepped outside together, the damp air cool against their skin. They walked toward the village square, where small clusters of townspeople lingered, their faces illuminated by flickering lanterns and the soft glow of hope. The sky above was a swirling canvas of dark clouds, the distant rumble of thunder a reminder of what was to come. Yet, in the quiet determination reflected in the eyes of those gathered, the curse felt less like an invisible oppressor and more like a challenge to be met with unity and love. Elena paused by her garden, now a patchwork of green shoots pushing through the damp earth. She knelt, fingers brushing tenderly over the soil, finding solace in the small miracles of growth amidst the storm. "We really like these plants," she murmured to Luca. "Fragile, yes, but stubbornly alive." Luca reached out, taking her hand in his. His voice was low, steady, filled with a newfound resolve. "Then we'll protect this town, these people, and each other, whatever comes." Together, they stood on the narrow stone bridge overlooking the restless sea, the wind tugging at their clothes and hair. The waves below crashed with a wild intensity, a mirror of the turmoil within. Yet, in that moment of shared silence, a quiet promise passed between them, a vow to face the coming storm united, to rebuild not just the town's walls but the hearts behind them. As night fell, the village held its breath. The gathering storms outside and inside the cafe had set in motion a turning point, one that would test the strength of love, hope, and the human spirit against the shadow of the curse. And as the first flashes of lightning streaked across the sky, Luca and Elena knew their journey was only just beginning. The fading light of the sun cast a warm glow over the coastal town, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and orange that mirrored the fragile emotions stirring between Alina and Luca. They sat side by side on the worn stone bench overlooking the restless sea, the quiet rhythm of waves mingling with the distant calls of seabirds. For a long moment, neither spoke, each lost in their own thoughts yet comforted by the other's presence. Alina's fingers traced the rough edges of the bench, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the sun dipped slowly beneath the water. The gentle breeze teased loose curls from her auburn hair, carrying with it the faint scent of salt and the earthiness of her beloved garden. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself before finally breaking the silence. "I've never told anyone this," she began softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not really. But I think I need to." Her green eyes met Luca's, shimmering with a mixture of pain and resolve. "My Frank, he died 3 years ago. It was sudden, a car accident on the way back from a visit to his family. One moment he was there, and then he was gone." Luca's breath caught. Though he had sensed the weight Elena carried, hearing it spoken aloud struck a chord deep within him. He reached out slowly, his hand brushing hers in a tentative gesture of solace. "I'm so sorry, Elena. That kind of loss, it changes everything." She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. It did. "For a long time I thought I'd never be able to love again. I was scared, not just of losing someone else, but of opening myself up to the possibility of pain. The curse that haunts this town, it feels like a reflection of my own fears." Luca squeezed her hand gently. "I understand more than you know. I lost my wife not long ago. She was my world. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever find the strength to build anything new either in the town or in my heart." The vulnerability in their voices created a fragile bridge between two souls battered by grief. They shared stories of love and loss, of hope and despair, weaving a tapestry of empathy that began to mend the cracks in their defenses. Alina spoke of the garden she tended, how nurturing life from the soil gave her a sense of purpose and a metaphor for healing. Luca revealed his sketches and plans, the blueprints not just for buildings but for renewal. As twilight deepened, the town's ancient stones seemed to hold their breath, listening to the quiet conversation that marked a turning point in its story. The oppressive weight of the curse felt momentarily lifted, replaced by a tentative promise that love, even when broken, could still endure. They rose together, the chill of evening settling in as stars began to prick the darkening sky. Luca looked at Alina, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the lanterns lining the narrow streets. "Thank you for trusting me," he said. Elena smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "Thank you for listening. Maybe we can find a way to rebuild more than just walls." Hand in hand, they walked back toward the heart of the town, their steps lightened by the fragile hope that from shared scars, new beginnings could bloom. The night embraced them, a silent witness to the first fragile threads of love weaving through the ruins. But as the shadows deepened, both knew the journey ahead would not be easy. The curse was still there, lurking in the cracks and whispers of the town's history. Yet in this moment, beneath the vast canopy of stars, Elena and Luca dared to believe that even the deepest wounds could heal, and that love could rise again from the ashes of heartbreak. The sea breeze carried with it a promise that tomorrow might bring light where there was once only darkness. And for the first time in a long while, their hearts beat not just with sorrow but with hope. The afternoon sun filtered softly through the dusty windows of Marco Vitel's study, casting a golden haze over the cluttered room. Luca and Alina stood side by side, their eyes fixed on the spread before them, faded photographs, brittle letters, and aged documents that whispered secrets from centuries past. Marco, ever the patient historian, pointed to a worn leather-bound journal resting in the center of the desk. "This," Marco began, his voice low and reverent, "is the story that began it all, the love that sparked the curse that haunts our town." Luca leaned closer, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. The journal belonged to Isabella Lombardi, a woman from a noble family whose tragic romance with a humble craftsman, Matteo, ended in betrayal and death. Their love was pure but forbidden, their union condemned by society and family alike. When Matteo was caught leaving Isabella's side, accusations of treachery flew like wildfire. Isabella was walled into her family's estate, her cries unheard while Matteo vanished, presumed dead in a storm by the sea. The town's heartbreak was palpable in every word, and legend held that their shattered love cursed the very stones of the town buildings, tumbling whenever hearts broke. Elena's fingers brushed a photograph of the crumbling estate, eyes misting over. "It's like their pain seeped into the earth," she whispered. Marco nodded. "The curse is more than superstition. It's a manifestation of collective grief and fear. And it has shaped our history ever since." Luca's thoughts drifted to his own wife, to the hollow H that had driven him back here. The parallels between the ancient lovers and their own lives struck him with a bittersweet force. He glanced at Elena, whose green eyes mirrored his own sorrow and hope. Later, they walked together among the ruins of the oldest collapsed house, the very heart of the curse. Luca's hand traced the rough stone, feeling the cold remnants of a love long lost. Elena's voice was soft as she broke the silence. "What if we redoom to repeat their mistakes? What if opening our hearts just leads to more ruin?" He took her hand gently. "We don't have to be prisoners of the past. We can choose differently." Their steps echoed softly as the wind whispered through broken walls. The emotional weight of the curse seemed to lift just a little, carried away by their shared courage. That evening, the trio gathered at Sofia Bellini's cafe, the warm glow inside a refuge from the rain drumming on the windows. The scent of fresh bread mingled with the rich aroma of coffee as they debated the curse's meaning. Sofia's cheerful presence reminded them that healing was possible, even amid despair. "The curse is a warning," Marco said thoughtfully. "A reminder of what happens when love is broken, but also a challenge to overcome it." Luca felt a surge of resolve. Back in his modest room, he spread blank sheets before him and began to sketch. His pen moved with purpose, each line weaving the story of Isabella and Matteo into a new design, a structure symbolizing resilience, hope, and the redemptive power of love. Elena watched him from the doorway, a small smile playing on her lips. The shadows of their past still lingered, but here, in these moments, they built something new together. As the night deepened, Luca's drawing took shape more than architecture. It was a blueprint for healing, a testament that love, even broken, could inspire renewal. The morning air was heavy with salt and the quiet hum of rebuilding. Luca Moretti stood before the skeletal remains of what once was a proud stone wall, his gaze tracing the jagged edges where stones refused to settle as planned. Around him, the town's heartbeat pulsed in the rhythmic sounds of hammers striking, saws slicing, and voices calling instructions. Yet despite the industrious energy, a subtle tremor of uncertainty lingered beneath the surface. "The mortar isn't setting right," Gianni muttered, brushing dust from his weathered hands as he crouched beside the wall. His brows furrowed in concentration, the lines of years spent under the sun deepening. "The foundation's still weak. The curse, it's like it's alive, testing us." Luca nodded slowly, the weight of Gianni's words settling over him like the afternoon shadows stretching across the rubble. For months, he had wrestled with the town's physical and emotional ruins, each stone a testament to love lost. Each crack a scar of heartbreak etched into the very fabric of their coastal home. Now those scars seemed to resist healing, as if the town itself held its breath, unwilling to let go of the pain. Elena Rossi approached quietly, her footsteps soft on the gravel path. In her hands, she carried a small basket of wildflower seedlings, their colors vibrant against the muted tones of stone and dust. She knelt near the base of the wall, her fingers gently planting the flowers in the small patches of earth that had survived the destruction. "They remind me," she said softly, meeting Luca's eyes, that even in the harshest places, life can take root. He allowed himself a faint smile, the first in days. It's a good metaphor, he admitted. For us, and for this town, their connection, fragile but growing, was a balm against the uncertainty that clouded their work. Yet as the day wore on, doubts crept back. A subtle vibration pulsed through the ground, a reminder that the curse was never far. Luca's heart tightened as a sudden tremor shook the half-built wall, sending a cascade of dust like ghostly ash into the air. "We need to be careful," Luca warned, his voice low but firm. Gianni's jaw clenched as he examined the shifting stones. "It's as if the town is reminding us why it's been broken for so long," Gianni said grimly. Marco Vitale joined them, his usually steady presence offering a measure of calm. "The stories say the curse thrives on broken hearts," he reminded them. "We're not just rebuilding walls, but hope. That's a fragile thing." The group exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of their task settling heavier with each passing moment. As the sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow over the ruins, the community gathered near the site. Sofia Bellini's warm smile and gentle words wove a thread of comfort through the crowd, her cafe's aroma of fresh bread and coffee still lingering in the evening air. Around a modest fire, laughter and shared stories began to stitch together the frayed edges of their spirits. Luca and Elena found themselves drawn together, their hands brushing in tentative contact. The firelight danced in Elena's expressive green eyes, reflecting a cautious optimism that mirrored his own. "We're not alone in this," Elena whispered, her voice barely above the crackling flames. Luca nodded, the walls around him no longer just stones and mortar, but the fragile beginnings of trust and renewal. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with setbacks and shadows of the past. But in this moment, hope took its first steady breath. Even as the night deepened, Luca's mind wrestled with the question that had haunted him since his return: could they truly rebuild what was broken? The answer, he realized, lay not just in the strength of their hands, but in the courage of their hearts. And with that thought, the dawn of a new day seemed just within reach. The morning air was crisp with the sharp tang of salt and pine as Luca Moretti stood amidst the skeletal remains of what was once the town's bustling square. His gaze drifted over the crumbled stone and shattered wood, the ruins whispering stories of love lost and lives interrupted. The curse was ever present here, a heavy silence hanging like a shroud. But today a new sound pierced the stillness, the steady, resolute tapping of a hammer. Turning towards the source, Luca spotted a figure moving with confident purpose. It was Gianni, the town's carpenter, a man whose rugged hands and weathered face told tales of decades spent wrestling with wood and time. Clad in a worn leather apron, Gianni examined the ruins with a practiced eye, his fingers tracing the edges of broken beams and splintered window frames. The carpenter's presence was like a pulse returning to the town's heart. "Luca," Gianni greeted, his voice rough but warm. "I heard you were back, trying to put the pieces together." Luca nodded, a small smile breaking through the usual reserve. "It's more than just buildings, it's the town's soul." Gianni's gaze softened. "Then we'll build it strong enough to hold both." With Gianni's arrival, a tangible shift began. The two men pored over faded blueprints and structural sketches, the dusty papers alive with plans and memories. Gianni's hands moved deftly, measuring and marking, his expertise a balm to the uncertainty that had plagued Luca. Each nail driven and beam lifted was a step against the curse's shadow. Elena joined them often, her presence grounding the effort in emotion and care. She tended her garden nearby, but her eyes frequently wandered to the worksite where Gianni and Luca crafted the future. The rhythmic tapping of Gianni's tools became a soundtrack to hope, blending with the sea's distant whisper and the murmurs of townsfolk who gathered, drawn by the promise of renewal. In the afternoons, Elena shared stories of the people who once lived in these homes, their heartbreaks and joys woven into the fabric of the town. Gianni listened attentively, his hands never still, his respect for the past deepening. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting golden hues across the half-rebuilt walls, the three stood together. Shadows lengthened, but the light seemed to linger, as if reluctant to leave this place of beginnings. Luca's heart stirred with cautious hope. The curse felt less like an inevitable doom and more like a challenge, one that could be met with skill, compassion, and unwavering will. "We were not just fixing wood and stone," Luca said quietly. "We were mending what's been broken inside all of us." Gianni nodded, his eyes reflecting the last light of day. "And with every board we replace, we build something stronger, something that lasts." As twilight wrapped the town in its embrace, the hammer's steady beat continued, a heartbeat of resilience echoing through the ruins. In the hands of the carpenter, the past and future intertwined, crafting a foundation not just for houses, but for hearts ready to hope again. Yet, even as the walls rose, the curse lingered in the air, a silent question waiting to be answered. Could love truly endure the ruins it left behind? The answer, Luca believed, was just beginning to take shape beneath Gianni's steady hands. The soft creak of hinges echoed through the narrow hallway as Luca stepped into Marco Vital's study, a room that smelled of aged paper, cedar wood, and the faint hint of sea salt. The afternoon light filtered through stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic patterns over shelves crowded with leather-bound tomes, brittle manuscripts, and sepia-toned photographs. Luca's eyes traced the spines of books that seemed to hold the weight of centuries, each a testament to the stories that had shaped the coastal town he had returned to rebuild. Marco, ever the guardian of history, beckoned Luca closer to a large oak table strewn with yellowed maps, weathered journals, and brittle letters. "These," Marco said, voice thick with reverence, "are the threads of our town's past. They tell of love that blossomed and wilted, of promises kept and broken, and of the curse that binds us all." Luca leaned over the table, fingers tracing the delicate lines of a hand-drawn map that marked the locations of the oldest ruins. "Each collapsed building," Marco continued, "is more than stone and mortar. It's a memory, a heartbreak carved in silence." As Marco recounted the tragic tale of a star-crossed couple from centuries past, whose love ended in betrayal and death, seeding the curse that caused buildings to crumble, when love faltered, Luca felt a stirring deep within. The architect in him had always seen structures as physical challenges, problems to solve with precision and skill. But here, in the stories Marco unveiled, the buildings were vessels of emotion, their ruins echoing with the pain and hope of generations. Later, the two friends made their way to the old watchtower overlooking the town. The salty breeze tousled Luca's dark hair, now touched with streaks of silver, as he gazed at the patchwork landscape of broken rooftops and tentative new construction. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, a fleeting promise of renewal. "This town," Marco said quietly, "is a living testament to resilience. Every stone that falls carries with it a story, but every stone that rises speaks of hope." Luca inhaled deeply, the scent of salt and earth grounding him. He understood now that his task was not merely about rebuilding walls, but about bridging past and present, honoring the memories etched in every crack and crevice. Their walk led them through a narrow alley, where a collapsed façade bore a faded inscription, a lover's final vow, weathered by time yet still legible. The sunlight filtered softly through the gaps, illuminating the broken stones, and casting long shadows that seemed to whisper of pain and perseverance. "This," Marco said, "is where history meets heart." That evening, under the warm glow of a lantern in Marco's modest workshop, Luca spread out his sketches. The amber light flickered over the newly inspired design structures that embraced the town's emotional architecture, blending strength with vulnerability. "You see," Marco smiled, watching Luca's determined expression. "You are not just rebuilding buildings. You are weaving hope back into the fabric of this town." Luca nodded, a quiet fire kindling within him. The weight of grief that had once anchored his heart seemed lighter now, buoyed by the legacy of love and loss he was entrusted to honor. His pencil moved swiftly across the paper, each line a promise, a vow to rebuild, to heal, to love again. As night deepened, the distant sound of the sea whispered through open windows, a lullaby for a town caught between ruin and redemption. Luca knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but bolstered by history and friendship, he was ready to face them. The bridge between past and present had been crossed, and in its span lay the promise of a future rebuilt on the foundations of memory and hope. And as the lantern's glow flickered softly against the walls, Luca felt, for the first time in a long while, the stirring of a fragile yet unyielding hope. The sun hung low over the coastal town, casting a honeyed glow across the weather-worn stone buildings and the narrow winding streets that Elena had walked since childhood. She found herself seated on the familiar stone steps of their family home, the salty breeze teasing loose strands of her curly auburn hair, while the scent of blooming jasmine wrapped around her like a gentle embrace. Beside her, Isabella's bright eyes reflected the fading light, earnest and unwavering. "Elena," Isabella began softly, her voice a blend of sisterly affection and quiet urgency, "you've been holding yourself back for too long. I see it in the way you avoid Luca, in the way you guard your heart like it's a fragile vase that might shatter at the slightest touch. But love isn't something to fear. It's what will help you heal, not break you more." Elena's gaze dropped to her hands, fingers absently tracing the cracks in the stone beneath her. "It's not that simple. Every time I think about trusting someone again, the memories come rushing back, the accident, the pain, the loss. I'm scared, Isabella. Scared that if I open up, I'll only end up broken again." Isabella reached out, a hand resting gently on Elena's knee. "I know the past hurts. But you can't live your life in its shadow. You deserve happiness, Elena. And Luca, he's not the past. He's something new, something worth risking everything for." The weight of Isabella's words settled between them, heavy yet comforting. For a moment, the only sounds were the distant cries of seagulls and the rhythmic crashing of waves against the cliffs. Elena breathed in deeply, the salty air filling her lungs, and felt a flicker of something she hadn't allowed herself in a long time hope. Later that evening, the family gathered for dinner in the modest kitchen, the room filled with the warm glow of candlelight and the aroma of freshly baked bread. Elena's parents exchanged glances as they listened to the sisters' quiet conversation, their faces etched with the lines of worry and years spent weathering their own storms. "We all want what's best for you, Elena," her mother said gently, reaching out to smooth a curl that had escaped behind her ear. "This town has seen too much heartache, but it's also filled with love. Don't let fear close you off from the life you deserve." Elena nodded, her heart heavy yet buoyed by the collective strength of her family. The curse that haunted the town was more than just a superstition, it was a tangible force that had shaped their lives. But tonight, surrounded by the people who loved her, Elena felt the first real stirrings of courage. The following day, as dusk painted the sky in shades of lavender and gold, Elena walked alone along the cliffside path. The wind tangled through her curls as the waves below roared in a timeless rhythm, mirroring the tempest of emotions within her. She paused at the edge, eyes tracing the flickering lights of the village nestled below, fragile yet steadfast. The past whispered to her in the sea breeze, memories of loss and regret threatening to pull her under. But beneath the sorrow was a steady pulse of determination, a desire to heal, to rebuild, not just the town but herself. She thought of Luca, the quiet architect whose sorrow mirrored her own, and the fragile connection they were beginning to forge. That evening, Elena found herself at Sophia's cafe, the warm glow of lanterns casting soft shadows across familiar faces. The hum of quiet conversations and the comforting scent of roasted coffee beans wrapped around her like a balm. Luca was already there, seated at a corner table, sketchbook open before him. Their eyes met, and a tentative smile flickered between them. As they spoke in hushed tones, their hands brushed lightly across the table, a small contact laden with promise. In that simple touch, Alina felt the thawing of old fears, the tentative hope of new beginnings. "I want to try," she whispered, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "For us, for the town, for what lies ahead." Luca's eyes held hers, a silent vow passing between them. The curse that had shadowed their lives was not just a force of destruction, but also a challenge to overcome, to rebuild not only walls but hearts. As the night deepened, the promise of healing blossomed quietly between them, a fragile yet unyielding foundation for the future. Alina knew the path ahead would not be easy, but with family ties strengthened and love beginning to bloom, the town's curse might finally meet its match. And as the stars blinked awake above the coastal town, a new chapter began, not just for Alina and Luca, but for all who called this place home. The coastal town lay under a deepening slate-gray sky, the kind that seemed to press down on the narrow streets and weathered stone walls with a weight that was almost physical. Luca Moretti stood on the edge of a partially rebuilt terrace, his hands gripping the rough-hewn railing as his dark eyes traced the horizon. The wind tugged at his coat and ruffled his dark hair, streaked now with silver like the storm clouds gathering overhead. The scent of the sea was sharp and pungent, mingling with the fresh, electric smell that always preceded a tempest. He felt the tension in the air, a familiar sensation that stirred far more than just the coming weather. It was as if the entire town held its breath, waiting for something to break the fragile truce between hope and ruin, love and loss. Luca's gaze fell to the cracks in the stone beneath his feet, the scars of the curse that had haunted this place for centuries. Buildings had crumbled once more, their shattered facades a testament to hearts broken and vows betrayed. Behind him, the sound of footsteps approached. Turning, he saw Alina Rossi moving steadily toward him, her auburn curls caught in the gusts, green eyes bright yet shadowed with worry. She carried a canvas bag filled with small tools and packets of seeds, remnants of her garden's promise amid the chaos. "The sky looks ready to open any moment," she said softly, her voice barely rising above the wind. Luca nodded. "It's more than just rain this time. There's a storm coming, a real one." Elena's gaze drifted toward the horizon where dark clouds rolled in thick swaths, blotting out the sun's last golden rays. "And it feels like more than weather, like everything is about to change." They stood together, two figures against the vast, brooding landscape, bound by the invisible threads of loss and hope that wove through the town's very stones. Later that afternoon, the warmth of Sofia Bellini's cafe offered a stark contrast to the chill outside. The scent of freshly brewed espresso and baked pastries filled the air, mingling with the soft murmur of voices and the clink of cups. Sofia, petite and silver-haired, moved with practiced grace behind the counter, her bright scarves fluttering as she served customers seeking comfort amid uncertainty. Alina sat near the window, her fingers wrapped tightly around a steaming cup. The rain had begun light at first, then growing in intensity, tapping rhythmically against the glass. She watched the droplets race each other down the pane, her mind far away. "You're holding onto that cup like it's a lifeline," Sofia said, sliding a fresh croissant onto the table. Alina smiled faintly. "Maybe it is." Sofia settled into the chair across from her, her eyes kind but knowing. "This town has seen storms before, Alina. Not just the ones in the sky. But every time we found a way through." "I want to believe that," Alina whispered. "But after everything that's fallen apart, sometimes it feels like the curse will win." "Curses are only as strong as the fear we give them," Sofia replied firmly. "Keep your heart open, even when it's hard. That's how we break the cycle." Meanwhile, in the heart of the town square, Luca and Marco Vital scrutinized the fragile state of a recently reinforced building. The structure groaned under the weight of the wind, the wooden beams creaking ominously as the storm picked up pace. "If this keeps up," Marco muttered, "we might lose more than just roofs tonight." Luca's jaw tightened. We've done everything we can to prepare. Now it's about weathering the storm. Marco nodded, his salt and pepper hair damp from the rain. The curse feels stronger, doesn't it? Like it's feeding off the fear. We can't let it, Luca said, eyes fierce. Not this time. As night fell, the town braced itself. Lanterns flickered behind shuttered windows, shadows danced along narrow alleys, and the wind howled like a living thing. Elena's garden, usually a sanctuary of life and growth, bent beneath the gusts. She stepped outside briefly, hands steadying a fragile bloom that refused to yield to the storm's assault. "Stay strong," she whispered to the flower, her voice trembling but resolute. Back at Luca's temporary quarters, sketches and blueprints lay scattered across a wooden table, illuminated by the soft glow of a single lamp. He traced a finger along the lines of a new design, one that symbolized not only the rebuilding of stone and timber, but the mending of broken hearts. The storm's first thunderclap rattled the shutters, a harbinger of the trials to come. Yet amid the howling wind and lashing rain, a fragile hope took root, one that Luca and Elena clung to fiercely, ready to face whatever ruin the night might bring. As the tempest gathered strength, the town seemed to hold its breath, poised on the edge of devastation and renewal. And within that fragile balance, two souls prepared to confront their deepest fears, united by a love as enduring as the stones beneath their feet. The night ahead would test everything: their courage, their trust, and the very fate of the coastal town they called home. And as the first fierce gusts tore through the streets, Luca whispered into the darkness, "We will rebuild. Together." Outside, the storm roared its challenge, but inside, a spark of defiant hope burned bright. The sky darkened with an unnatural swiftness, heavy clouds gathering like a looming threat over the coastal town. Luca Moretti stood on the narrow balcony of his half-restored home, eyes scanning the horizon where the sea and sky melded into a foreboding gray mass. The wind was picking up, carrying a biting chill that whispered of the tempest to come. Somewhere deep in his chest, a familiar tightness gripped him, not just the fear of the storm, but the weight of everything the town had endured. Inside, Elena moved with purposeful calm, her fingers deftly securing loose shutters while casting occasional glances toward Luca. The air between them was thick with unspoken fears. The impending storm, a physical manifestation of the emotional turmoil that had stalked them since they began this journey together. Yet, amid the chaos, there was a fragile thread of hope binding them, a belief that love might yet survive this night. As the first drops of rain splattered against the weathered stone, a distant rumble of thunder rolled across the cliffs. Luca descended the stairs, his boots thudding against the wooden floor, joining Elena as they moved through the house, fortifying weak points and gathering supplies. The wind howled through gaps in the walls, carrying with it the scent of salt and damp earth. Each gust seemed to shake the very bones of the town, as if the invisible curse itself was awakening, eager to reclaim its hold. Outside, Marco and Gianni battled the elements. Their figures huddled against the storm as they reinforced the fragile walls of the oldest house, the town's heart, and the symbol of their collective pain and hope. Lightning illuminated their determined faces, sweat and rain mingling as they shouted instructions over the roar of the tempest. Every strike of thunder seemed to echo the pounding of their hearts, a rhythm of resilience amid destruction. Back in the cafe, Sofia Bellini opened her doors wide, welcoming neighbors seeking refuge from the storm. The warm glow of lanterns cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with whispered prayers and quiet songs of comfort. Isabella moved among the frightened children, her gentle voice weaving stories of brighter days to come. The cafe was a sanctuary, a beacon of light amid the encroaching darkness. As the night deepened, the storm grew fiercer. Rain lashed against windows like shards of glass, and the wind threatened to tear the roofs from their moorings. Luca and Elena found themselves huddled in a corner of the house, the flicker of a single candle casting soft light on their faces. Words were scarce. Instead, their shared silence spoke volumes, a mixture of fear, longing, and the tentative stirrings of trust. Memories surged unbidden, Luca's late wife, her laughter echoing in empty halls. Elena's lost Fianc, the pain still raw beneath her guarded exterior. The storm outside was relentless, but inside something gentler took root, the fragile promise of healing, born from shared sorrow and quiet courage. Suddenly, a loud crack shattered the fragile calm as a section of the roof buckled under the storm's assault. Dust and debris rained down, and Luca instinctively shielded Elena, his heart hammering with a fierce protectiveness. Together, they scrambled to secure the breach, their movements synchronized, instinctive. The night stretched on, endless and unforgiving. Yet with each passing hour, the storm's fury began to wane, leaving behind a town battered but unbroken. As dawn broke, the first tentative rays of sunlight pierced the heavy clouds, illuminating the ruined streets and the faces of those who had endured. Luca stepped outside, breathing in the fresh, rain-washed air. Around him, the town was scarred but standing, a testament to resilience. Elena joined him, her hand slipping into his, their fingers entwined like the roots of the garden she tended. In that moment, the weight of the curse seemed to lift, replaced by a fragile hope that love, like the town, could rise from ruin. "We made it," Elena whispered, her voice trembling with relief and something more profound. Luca nodded, a faint smile breaking through the weariness. Together. As neighbors emerged from their shelters, drawn by the fragile light of a new day, the community gathered wary but united, ready to face the long road ahead. The storm had tested them all, but it had not broken them. Instead, it had forged bonds stronger than fear, laying the foundation for healing and renewal. And amid the ruins, Luca and Elena stood side by side, their hearts beating in rhythm with the town's rebirth. The tempest had passed, but its echoes lingered, a reminder of love's power to endure, even in the face of the fiercest storms. Yet, as they looked toward the horizon, a silent question hung in the air. Would the fragile hope born this night be enough to finally break the curse that had haunted their lives for so long? The answer awaited the dawn. The morning after the storm broke over the coastal town, the sky remained a somber gray, heavy with the memory of the tempest's fury. Luca Moretti stood at the crest of a hill overlooking the main square, his gaze sweeping across the devastation that stretched before him. The wind still whispered through the skeletal remains of buildings, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and salt. Broken timbers jutted out like the ribs of some great sea beast torn asunder, and shards of glass littered the cobblestones, reflecting the dull light. Townsfolk began to emerge from their homes, or what was left of them drawn to the square by an unspoken urgency. Faces were streaked with rain and grime, eyes wide with disbelief and grief. Among them were familiar figures, Marco Vital, shoulders hunched as if carrying the weight of the town's history itself. Sofia Bellini, moving between groups with comforting words and warm smiles despite the quiver in her own voice. And Gianni, whose hands were already stained with the grit of labor, ready to face the work ahead. Elena Rossi appeared nearby, her auburn curls damp and tangled, eyes scanning the wreckage with a mixture of heartbreak and determination. She moved swiftly to her younger sister Isabella, who stood rooted like a fragile sapling amidst the ruins of their family home. Tears traced silent paths down Isabella's cheeks as she clung to Elena's hand. The scent of splintered wood and wet stone enveloped them, mingling with the ever-present sea breeze. Elena knelt beside her sister, her voice soft and steady, a balm for raw wounds. "We will rebuild, Isa. Together." Luca's heart clenched at the scene, the fragile hope in Elena's words echoing his own unspoken vow. He stepped down from the hill, weaving through the crowd to join her. Their eyes met briefly, a shared understanding passing between them that the true work was only just beginning. Inside Sophia's cafe, the atmosphere was thick with whispered plans and quiet resolve. Marco sat at a corner table, surrounded by faded maps and brittle pages from the town's archives. His salt and pepper hair was tousled, his brow furrowed in concentration as he traced the outlines of the town's oldest structures. Around him, villagers gathered, their voices low but purposeful. The cafe, usually a place of laughter and light conversation, had transformed into a command center for hope. Sophia moved gracefully among them, her silver hair catching the lamplight as she offered tea and encouragement. "We've faced ruin before," she reminded the assembled crowd, "and each time we found the strength to rise again. This town is more than its buildings. It is the spirit of its people." Gianni, the town's carpenter, entered with a stack of timber slivers, his hands rough but steady. He exchanged nods with Luca, whose sketches and plans had been reduced to soggy messes by the storm. "We'll start again," Gianni said gruffly, a spark of determination lighting his eyes. "One nail at a time." As afternoon gave way to dusk, the community gathered in small clusters, sharing stories and comforting one another. The weight of loss was palpable, but so was the thread of hope weaving through their conversations. Luca and Elena found themselves together once more, walking slowly toward the hill that had become their vantage point. They stood side by side in the growing twilight. The ruined town sprawled beneath them like a wounded heart. A lone seagull's distant cry pierced the quiet, a plaintive yet persistent sound that stirred something within them both. Luca reached out, his hand brushing lightly against Elena's. "We've lost much," he said quietly, voice rough with emotion. "But we still have each other. And this town," Elena nodded, her green eyes reflecting the last light of day. "We'll rebuild, Luca. Not just the walls, but the love that holds them together." The night wrapped around them, a blanket of stars beginning to pierce the gloom. In that fragile silence, between ruin and renewal, a promise took root that from the ashes, they would rise again, stronger and more whole than before. Yet the question lingered, heavy as the sea breeze: could the town's curse truly be broken, or was this cycle of love and ruin destined to repeat? As the first embers of hope glowed in their hearts, Luca and Elena knew the answer would come only through courage, trust, and the unyielding power of love. The dawn of a new chapter was beginning, but the path ahead remained uncertain, fraught with both peril and possibility. And so, with hearts intertwined and spirits unbroken, they prepared to face whatever the future might hold. The dawn broke gently over the coastal town, casting a warm, golden light over the devastation left by the storm. Luca Moretti stood quietly in the center of the town square, the ground beneath him still littered with splintered wood and crumbled stone. The air was thick with the mingling scents of salt water and damp earth, a reminder of nature's relentless power. Around him, the once vibrant heart of the town lay in ruins, each fallen beam and shattered window a testament to the fragile balance between love and loss that had governed their lives. Elena Rossi approached slowly, her footsteps soft against the debris-strewn cobblestones. Her curly auburn hair was damp from the morning mist, and her expressive green eyes reflected the turmoil within her. She stopped beside Luca, their shoulders barely touching, a small gesture of comfort in the vast emptiness. "We can't let this be the end," Elena said softly, her voice carrying a quiet strength. "The storm took so much, but it didn't take everything. Not if we don't let it." Luca turned to face her, the deep-set sorrow in his eyes tempered by a new spark of resolve. "I thought about leaving, about walking away from all of this," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "But I can't. This town, these people. They need someone to believe in them. To believe that love can still survive here." The weight of grief that had anchored Luca for so long began to lift, replaced by a fragile hope. He reached into the pocket of his worn jacket and pulled out a sketchbook, the edges frayed from use. Opening it, he revealed fresh drawings, plans for rebuilding homes, for restoring the town's charm, for mending not just walls but hearts. Elena smiled, the corners of her lips trembling with a mix of relief and anticipation. "Together," she said, "we can rebuild more than just buildings. We can rebuild trust, hope, love." Their hands met, fingers intertwining as the morning sun climbed higher, illuminating the path ahead. Later that day, the pair found themselves inside Sofia Bellini's cafe, a warm sanctuary amid the cold remnants outside. The rich aroma of espresso mingled with the scent of freshly baked bread, wrapping the space in comforting familiarity. Townsfolk gathered here, their conversations a mix of sorrow, determination, and tentative optimism. Marco Vitale, Luca's childhood friend and the town historian, leaned over the counter, sharing stories from the town's past tales of heartbreak, resilience, and the enduring spirit that had long defined their community. Gianni, the town's rugged carpenter, moved among the tables, offering practical advice and steady encouragement. Luca spread his sketches on a wooden table, the plans now taking shape with the input of friends and neighbors. Alina arranged a small vase of wildflowers on the table, a symbol of life, persisting despite adversity. "This is more than just construction," Marco said, nodding toward the drawings. "It's a promise, to ourselves and to the generations that will come after us." As the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the cafe windows, Luca and Alina found a quiet moment to themselves. They stepped outside into Alina's garden, the soil rich and dark from the recent rains. She knelt, planting seeds with careful hands, the promise of new growth mirrored in her determined gaze. "This garden is my sanctuary," Alina confessed. "A place where broken things can heal and grow again." Luca watched her, the vibrancy of the blossoms contrasting starkly with the ruin beyond the garden walls. "Then let's make this town our garden," he said softly. "Together we'll nurture it back to life." Evening approached, painting the sky in hues of purple and orange as the couple walked along the shoreline. The waves whispered their timeless song, gentle and persistent, much like the love and hope they were choosing to embrace. Their conversation drifted from fears to dreams, each word binding them closer. "We can't undo the past," Alina said, "but we can choose what comes next." "And I choose us," Luca replied, his voice steady and sure. As twilight faded into night, the town held its breath not in fear but in expectation. A new chapter was beginning, one written not just in stone and timber, but in hearts brave enough to love again. The decision to rebuild was more than an architectural endeavor, it was a declaration of faith. Faith that love, even when broken, could be mended. That from ruin could rise resilience. That the town's curse was not an end, but a challenge waiting to be overcome. And as Luca and Alina stood hand in hand beneath the stars, they knew their journey was just beginning. The morning sun filtered softly through the lace curtains of Sofia Bellini's cafe, casting delicate patterns on the worn wooden floorboards. The scent of freshly ground coffee beans mingled with the salty tang of the nearby sea, creating a comfort that felt almost tangible. Inside, a small group of townsfolk had gathered, their faces etched with the lines of loss and hope intertwined. The cafe, once merely a place to grab a quick espresso, had transformed into a sanctuary, a place where broken hearts could find solace in shared stories and quiet laughter. Luca Moretti sat at a corner table, his sketchbook open before him, but his eyes were distant as they traced the faces around him. Sofia moved gracefully between the tables, her silver hair catching the light, her bright scarves vibrant against the muted tones of the cafe. She paused near Luca, a warm smile lifting the corners of her mouth. "The town needs this," she said softly, pouring a cup of steaming coffee. "More than walls and roofs. It needs a heart." Luca nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle deep within. Since his return, the weight of the town's curse had pressed heavily on his shoulders. Each fallen building told a story of love lost, of promises broken, and the invisible scars those stories had left on the people. But here, in this small cafe, there was a flicker of something different, a fragile but growing hope. Outside, the sounds of reconstruction hummed steadily. Gianni, the town's carpenter, was already hard at work, his rough hands steady as he measured and cut timber for the next restoration project. Luca stepped out, the gravel crunching beneath his boots, and joined him at the site where a once proud wall now lay in ruin. "This one's tricky," Gianni said, brushing dust from a splintered beam. "We have to be careful not to just patch it up. It needs to stand strong like it did before." Luca ran a hand through his dark hair, now streaked with grey. "Stronger," he agreed. "Not just for the building, but for the people who live inside it." Their shared purpose was a balm to the lingering grief that had shadowed Luca since his wife's passing. Each nail driven, each stone set was an act of defiance against the curse that had held the town captive for so long. As the day wore on, Elena arrived, her curly auburn hair catching the light as she made her way to the cafe's small garden out back. Kneeling beside the earth, she tended to the sprouting plants with care, her fingers brushing gently over vibrant green leaves and delicate petals. The garden was her sanctuary, a living metaphor for healing and renewal. "You always find the beauty," Luca said quietly as he joined her, watching a tiny bud unfurl. Elena looked up, her expressive green eyes meeting his. "Because it's there," she replied, "even when everything else feels broken." Their connection deepened in these small moments, the unspoken understanding weaving a thread of hope between them. Back inside, as evening settled, the cafe buzzed with a newfound energy. Sophia regaled the group with stories from her past, tales of love, loss, and laughter that drew smiles and occasional tears. The warmth in the room was a stark contrast to the chill of the curse that still lingered outside. Marco Vitel, Luca's childhood friend and the town historian, leaned forward, his eyes bright with the thrill of shared purpose. "We're not just rebuilding buildings," he said. "We're rebuilding the soul of this town." Luca raised his cup in silent agreement, the clink of ceramic a small but meaningful sound amid the chorus of voices. As night deepened, the gathering slowly dispersed, but the spirit they had kindled remained. The road ahead was still uncertain, and the curse's shadow loomed. Yet, within the walls of Sophia's cafe, and in the hands of those who fought to rebuild, a fragile but fierce hope had taken root. Could love and resilience truly overcome the ruin that had defined their lives? Luca didn't have the answer yet, but for the first time in a long while, he felt ready to find out. And as the stars blinked softly over the coastal town, the promise of healing whispered on the breeze, stirring the heartbeats of all who dared to believe. The sun dipped low over the horizon, casting a warm, golden hue across the coastal town, bathing the broken stones and battered walls in a soft blush. Luca Moretti and Elena Rossi found themselves seated side by side on the old stone bench overlooking the restless sea, the waves whispering secrets to the shore. The gentle breeze tugged at Elena's curly auburn hair, sending loose strands dancing in the air. Luca's eyes, deep and shadowed by grief yet flickering with a newfound light, met hers. There was a quiet between them, not the silence of strangers but the comfortable stillness shared by two souls slowly opening. "It's beautiful," Elena murmured, her voice barely louder than the sea's murmur. "This moment, I mean. Like the world has paused just for us." Luca nodded, a faint smile tracing his lips. "I never thought I'd find peace in this town again. Not after everything that's happened. But sitting here, with you. It feels like the first step toward something real." The path to this moment had been anything but simple. The town's curse, an invisible weight pressing on every cracked wall and shattered home, had kept them both chained to the past. For Luca, it was the memory of his late wife, whose absence haunted every corner of his heart. For Elena, it was the loss of her funk, a wound still raw beneath her guarded exterior. Yet, their shared pain had become a bridge rather than a barrier, drawing them closer in a fragile dance of trust and tentative hope. Later that evening, Luca retreated to his makeshift studio, a small, sunlit room cluttered with blueprints, sketches, and the scent of freshly sharpened pencils. Dust motes floated lazily in the air as he spread out his latest designs across the rough wooden table. This time, the drawings were different. Gone were the cold, rigid lines of mere reconstruction. Instead, the plans breathed with life, curves and angles flowing like the ebb and flow of the sea beyond the window. Elena stepped inside, her footsteps soft on the worn floorboards. She leaned over the sketches, eyes wide with wonder. "It's alive," she said, tracing a finger along the sweeping archways and open courtyards. "Like it's not just a building, but a story." Luca's gaze met hers, a flicker of vulnerability shining through. "That's exactly what it is. A story of this town, of all the broken pieces we're trying to fit back together. It's about hope, about resilience, and about us, about what we rebuilding, not just with stone and mortar, but with trust and love." Her smile was soft, the barriers around her heart beginning to crumble like the walls they sought to mend. "I want to be part of that story, Luca." Every chapter. Days passed, and the pair found solace in the gentle rhythm of the town's daily life. They often met at Sofia Bellini's cafe, a warm haven filled with the rich aroma of freshly ground coffee and the comforting murmur of familiar voices. Sofia, ever the nurturing presence, welcomed them with open arms and bright scarves that seemed to carry the sun's own warmth. "You're both doing something wonderful," Sofia said one afternoon, her eyes twinkling behind silver-framed glasses. "Not just rebuilding buildings, but hearts. This town needs that as much as the stones do." Luca and Alina shared a glance, their hands brushing briefly across the table. The simple gesture spoke volumes, a promise of partnership, of shared burdens and joys. The community's quiet support wrapped around them like a gentle tide, lifting their spirits when doubts threatened to resurface. One evening, as lanterns flickered to life along the narrow cobblestone streets, Luca and Alina walked hand in hand beneath the soft glow. The scent of salt air mingled with blooming jasmine, carrying the promise of new beginnings. They spoke openly about their fears, the terror of loving again, the haunting shadows of their pasts, and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, they could break the cycle of heartbreak that had long gripped the town. "What if we fail?" Elena's voice trembled, the vulnerability laid bare. "Then we try again," Luca replied firmly, squeezing her hand. "Because love, like these buildings, needs care and courage to stand tall, and I believe we have both." As they paused beneath a canopy of stars, the night wrapped around them like a comforting shawl. The past was still there, but so was something new, a fragile, growing light that promised healing and renewal. The morning sun bathed the ruins of the oldest house in a golden light that seemed to both highlight its decay and promise renewal. Luca Moretti stood beside Alina Rossi at the edge of the crumbled foundation, their eyes tracing the outlines of broken walls and shattered memories. This house, more than any other in the town, carried the weight of the curse, the emblem of heartbreak and loss that had shadowed the coastal village for centuries. "It's more than just wood and stone," Luca murmured, his voice low, filled with reverence. "This house, it's the heart of everything that's broken here." Elena nodded, her fingers brushing a loose pebble on the ground. "And what we build here will be the heart of what heals." The symbolism wasn't lost on the small group gathered around them. Marco Vitel, ever steady and pragmatic, adjusted his cap and surveyed the site with a historian's eye. This house stood through storms and betrayals, but it fell when love failed. Rebuilding it is no small task, but it's the right one. Gianni, the town's carpenter, already had his tools at the ready, his experienced hands eager to bring the plans to life. Sofia Bellini arrived, her warm smile and bright scarves cutting through the morning chill, carrying coffee and pastries for the workers. The cafe owner's presence was a reminder that this was about more than architecture, it was about community. As the first hammer blow echoed against the stones, a ripple of energy passed through the group. The sound was a heartbeat, tentative but steady, like the first breath after a long silence. Luca's mind raced with the memories that clung to this house. He thought of the lovers from the century-old tragedy Marco had recounted, their story etched into the town's collective soul. He thought of his late wife, Isabella, whose love had been cut short by illness, leaving him adrift among ruins both physical and emotional. Beside him, Alina caught his gaze and squeezed his hand, grounding him. "Well, build this together," she said softly. Not just the house, but something stronger, something that lasts. Days passed in a blur of sawdust and sweat. The townsfolk joined the effort, their fears slowly giving way to a shared purpose. Children watched wide-eyed as walls rose from rubble, and elders whispered prayers for healing. The curse's oppressive weight seemed to lift, if only in small increments. At dusk, when the work paused, Alina retreated to her garden near the site. The blooms smelled rich and alive, their colors vibrant against the sinking sun. She knelt among the flowers, feeling the earth's pulse beneath her fingers, a reminder that growth was always possible, even after devastation. Luca often found her there, the two of them sharing quiet moments amid the scents and colors of renewal. One evening he unfolded his latest sketches, the designs more ambitious and hopeful than anything before. "Look," he said, holding the paper between them. "This isn't just a house. It's a testament to resilience, to love that rebuilds rather than destroys." Elena's eyes shone with tears of gratitude and something deeper, a fragile thread of trust weaving between them. "It's beautiful, Luca, like us." Their bond, forged in the fires of loss and hope, became the cornerstone of the town's revival. The oldest house rose slowly but surely, a beacon of light against the dark history that had threatened to consume them. Yet, as the final beams were set in place, a hush fell over the crowd. The air felt charged, the invisible presence of the curse lingering like a breath held too long. Would this act of rebuilding be enough to break the cycle? Or was the town doomed to watch its walls crumble with every broken vow? Luca met Elena's gaze, their fears mirrored but their resolve unwavering. "We build because we believe," he said, voice steady, "and belief is stronger than any curse." As night fell, the lanterns around the site flickered warmly, casting hopeful shadows on the rising walls. The town held its breath, caught between ruin and redemption, waiting for the dawn to decide its fate. The oldest house, once a symbol of heartbreak, now stood as a testament to the power of love rebuilt, a fragile yet unyielding promise that even in the deepest ruins, hope could take root and grow. And as Luca and Alina stood together beneath the stars, their hands intertwined, the first whispers of a new beginning stirred in the coastal breeze. The morning mist clung stubbornly to the narrow cobblestone streets of the coastal town, but a gentle warmth hinted at the sun's arrival beyond the horizon. Luca Moretti stood on the weathered scaffolding that framed the silhouette of the town's oldest collapsed house, the very heart of the ancient curse that had haunted this place for centuries. Beside him, Elena Rossi's hands were steady despite the tremor of excitement that fluttered beneath her calm exterior. Together, they held the final wooden beam, a symbol of resilience and renewal. "Ready?" Luca asked, his voice low, carrying the weight of years burdened by sorrow and hope. Elena nodded, her green eyes shining with quiet confidence. "Let's finish this." As they carefully positioned the beam, their fingers brushed an electric spark that neither had dared to expect. The sun broke through the dissipating clouds, casting golden light across the worn stone walls and scaffolding. It was as if the heavens themselves were blessing their endeavor. Below, the townspeople gathered in the square, their faces lifted toward the sky, sensing the subtle shift in the air. The heavy, oppressive atmosphere that had long burdened their community began to lift, replaced by a palpable lightness that seeped into every corner. "It's happening," whispered Marco Vitale, his voice thick with emotion. The local historian and Luca's lifelong friend stood among the crowd, his salt and pepper hair ruffled by the sea breeze. "The curse is breaking." Sofia Bellini, the cafe owner whose warmth had become a beacon of hope, smiled through tears. "It's the promise of love, finally fulfilled." As Luca and Alina descended from the scaffolding, the crowd erupted in quiet cheers and relieved laughter. Children darted through the streets, their joyous voices ringing like bells, while elders exchanged knowing glances, the burden of generations beginning to lift. Later, gathered in the small town square, Marco began to recount the legend that had shadowed their home. "Centuries ago," he said, voice steady and reverent, A love so fierce it defied all odds ended in betrayal and heartbreak. The pain was so deep, so devastating, that it seeped into the very stones of this town, cursing it with ruin whenever love faltered. Elena's fingers twined nervously with Luca's as they listened, the story resonating deeply with their own struggles. Yet, unlike the tragic tale, their shared journey had led them not to despair but toward healing. Sophia raised her cup, voice warm and encouraging. Tonight, we celebrate not just the rebuilding of our homes, but the rebuilding of our hearts. As dusk painted the sky in shades of pink and lavender, Luca and Elena wandered through the streets, now restored and vibrant. The scent of salt and blooming jasmine mingled with the gentle murmur of waves crashing against the cliffs. The town breathed anew, its scars softened by time and care. "Do you think it's really over?" Elena asked softly, her gaze searching Luca's face. He squeezed her hand gently. "If we keep choosing love, I believe it will be." Their steps carried them toward Elena's garden, now bursting with life, a testament to the resilience that had taken root within them both. Under the canopy of stars, they stood together, hearts entwined, ready to face whatever future awaited, no longer prisoners to the curse but architects of their own destiny. But just as the night deepened, a faint tremor stirred beneath their feet, a subtle reminder that even the strongest foundations require constant care. Luca's eyes met Elena's, a silent promise passing between them, to nurture this fragile hope, to guard it fiercely, and to build a love that could weather every storm. And so, with the oldest house standing tall once more, the town's shadows receded, leaving space for the dawn of a new chapter, one not written in ruin, but in the enduring power of love. The coastal town basked in the glow of a late afternoon sun that seemed to wash away years of sorrow, its golden rays touching every corner, every stone, every smile that now adorned the faces of its people. Luca Moretti stood with Elena on the weathered cobblestones of the town square, their eyes tracing the outlines of buildings that once again stood proud and unyielding against the horizon. The curse that had plagued their home for so long, an invisible weight that crumbled walls and hearts alike, felt lighter, as if it had begun to unravel with every brick laid and every bond mended. Around them, the town breathed with renewed life. The pastel colors of the rebuilt houses caught the sun, their shutters open wide to embrace the salty sea breeze. Flowers bloomed in window boxes, their scents mingling with the tang of the Mediterranean air. Children's laughter echoed from the narrow streets, a sound that had been missing for far too long. Elena's hand found Luca's, their fingers intertwining with a quiet certainty. It was a touch that spoke of healing, of trust reclaimed from the ashes of heartbreak. Sofia Bellini's cafe, a steadfast beacon of warmth, hummed with activity. Inside, the aroma of freshly baked focaccia and rich espresso filled the air, weaving through the conversations and light-hearted banter of the townsfolk who had gathered to celebrate the tangible progress. Sofia herself flitted from table to table, her silver hair catching the light as she offered a nurturing smile and a kind word to each visitor. Her cafe had become more than a place to eat, it was a sanctuary, a place where hope took root and grew alongside the vines that climbed the walls outside. At a corner table, Marco Vitel unfolded a centuries-old map, his weathered fingers tracing the faded lines that charted the town's history. As he spoke, his voice carried the weight of generations, recounting tales of love and loss, of resilience that had defined the community long before Luca and Elena's time. His stories wove the past and present together, reminding everyone that the town's spirit endured despite the shadows cast by the curse. Luca, sketchbook open on the rough wooden table beside Marco, captured the essence of their vision in precise strokes. His designs were no longer just about bricks and mortar, they were blueprints for emotional restoration. Architectures of hope that sought to rebuild not only homes but hearts. Elena leaned close, her eyes bright with passion and possibility as they discussed their plans. The future they envisioned was not without challenges, but it was theirs to shape together. As evening descended, the town's lights flickered on like stars brought to earth, illuminating the streets with a soft glow. Luca and Alina lingered beneath the archway of an ancient stone building, their silhouettes framed by the fading light. Words were unnecessary. Their shared glance conveyed an unspoken promise. The curse that had once bound the town in fear was no longer an invincible force. Through resilience, love, and the unwavering commitment of its people, the town was rising anew. But as the night settled and the sea whispered secrets beyond the cliffs, a lingering question remained in the cool air. Would the foundations they had laid hold against the unknown storms yet to come? For now, hope reigned supreme, a fragile yet fierce flame burning bright in the heart of a town reborn. The night was far from over, and the story was still unfolding. But as Luca and Alina stood hand in hand, the future seemed a promise rather than a threat, a testament to the power of love to conquer even the darkest curses. Their journey was far from complete, but tonight, the architect of broken vows had built something lasting, something that no storm could ever tear down. The morning sun cast a gentle glow over Alina's garden as she knelt among the blossoming flowers, her fingers deftly weaving through the rich soil, coaxing life from the earth. The sweet scent of jasmine mingled with the briny air drifting in from the sea, creating an intoxicating blend that seemed to breathe new energy into the coastal town. Each petal, each leaf, was a testament to resilience, fragile yet determined, much like the hearts that inhabited the crumbling streets beyond the garden's border. Luca stood nearby, his sketchbook balanced on his knee, the lines of his latest design capturing the interplay of light and shadow that danced across the garden's vibrant colors. His dark hair, streaked with silver, caught the sunlight like threads of silver caught in the sea breeze. His eyes, once clouded with sorrow, now held a glimmer of something softer, something more hopeful. As Alina glanced up and caught his gaze, a quiet smile passed between them, the unspoken language of shared healing. "You've brought this place back to life," Luca said softly, his voice a low murmur beneath the chorus of birdsong. "It's more than just plants. It's a promise." Elena's smile deepened, her green eyes shining with a mixture of pride and vulnerability. "It's what love looks like when it's allowed to grow again." Their hands brushed as she reached to tuck a stray curl behind her ear, and the touch sparked a warmth that settled deep within their chests. For a moment, the years of pain and loss seemed to fall away, leaving only the quiet joy of connection. The peaceful scene was soon joined by the familiar warmth of Sofia Bellini's presence. Carrying a basket of freshly baked pastries and steaming coffee, Sofia's bright scarves fluttered like vibrant banners in the gentle breeze. She settled at the garden's edge, her laughter mingling effortlessly with the playful teasing from Isabella, Elena's younger sister. "You two look like you've found your own little paradise," Sofia remarked, offering a knowing smile. Isabella grinned, nudging Alina gently. "It's about time you let someone in, sis. This town's been waiting for it." The sense of community wrapped around Elena and Luca like a comforting shawl. Here, amid the blooming flowers and the laughter of friends, the scars of heartbreak began to fade, replaced by the tentative but growing belief in new beginnings. As twilight descended, painting the sky in hues of pink and purple, Luca and Alina found themselves standing hand in hand, the garden's vibrant life a mirror of their own emotional rebirth. The distant crash of waves against the rocky shore underscored the enduring rhythm of the town, a reminder that, like the sea, love could be both tumultuous and endlessly renewing. "We've come so far," Alina whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of memory and hope. Luca nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "And there's still so much to build together." In that quiet moment, beneath the vast expanse of the evening sky, the promise of tomorrow felt as tangible and beautiful as the garden blooming around them, a living testament to the power of love to heal, to grow, and to endure beyond even the deepest wounds. But as the stars began to peek through the darkening sky, an unspoken question lingered in the air. Could the fragile beauty they had nurtured withstand whatever storms fate might yet bring? The answer lay not in the certainty of the future, but in their shared courage to face it as architects not only of buildings, but of broken vows and mended hearts. And so, under the watchful gaze of the night, the garden of promises flourished, a beacon of hope in a town reborn from ruin. The sun dipped low behind the rugged cliffs, casting a golden hue over the coastal town that had, for so long, been shadowed by sorrow. The oldest house, now standing sturdy and proud where once it had crumbled into dust, was bathed in the soft glow of lanterns hung carefully by the townspeople. Luca and Alina stood side by side on the worn cobblestones, their breaths visible in the cooling evening air. Around them, the faint murmur of neighbors and friends blended with the gentle lap of waves against the shore. Luca's gaze lingered on the house, a structure that had once symbolized heartbreak but now represented hope. His fingers toyed with the edge of his jacket, a nervous habit he'd long carried but rarely shown. Elena's hand found his, warm and steady, grounding him in the moment. "It's beautiful," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Alina smiled, her green eyes shining with a mixture of relief and something deeper, something tentative yet fierce. "Not just the house, Luca. This us. Everything we've been through. It's beautiful because it's real." The silence that followed was charged with the weight of unspoken fears and hopes. For so long, both had carried the burdens of past losses, the shadows of love lost and trust broken. But here, in the heart of the town they both cherished, they found the courage to face those shadows together. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" Elena asked softly, her thumb brushing over the back of Luca's hand. He nodded thoughtfully. "Every day. But I'm learning that it's not about forgetting the past, it's about choosing what we build from it." As twilight deepened, the sounds of the town grew livelier. From the cafe down the street, laughter and the clinking of glasses spilled into the evening air. Sofia Bellini had once again gathered the community under her warm roof, a beacon of light in a place long marked by darkness. Inside the cafe, the familiar faces of friends and neighbors welcomed Luca and Elena with open arms. Marco stood nearby, his salt and pepper hair catching the soft lamplight as he shared stories of the town's history, his voice rich with reverence and hope. The journal he held, a fragile relic containing the original tragic love story, seemed almost sacred in his hands. "This story has haunted us for generations," Marco said, his eyes meeting Luca's. "But maybe, just maybe, it's time we write a new ending." Luca felt a swell of emotion rise within him. Here, surrounded by the people who had witnessed his pain and shared their own, he understood the truth of Marco's words. The past was never truly gone, but it didn't have to define the future. Later, as the night air grew cooler, Luca and Elena walked to her garden, a small patch of vibrant life nestled between the stone houses. The scent of jasmine and salt mingled, carried by a gentle breeze that whispered promises of renewal. Elena knelt beside a cluster of blooming flowers, her fingers tracing the delicate petals. "This garden is my sanctuary," she confessed. "Every flower here is a promise to myself, to the town, to you, that we can grow beyond the pain." Luca crouched beside her, his hand covering hers. "And I want to be part of that growth, not just as the architect who rebuilds walls, but as someone who rebuilds hearts." Their eyes locked, and in that moment, the weight of solitude lifted. They were no longer prisoners of their pasts, but partners in a shared future, one forged from the ruins, but reaching toward the light. As the stars began to pepper the night sky, Luca and Elena stood together, embracing the intertwining of fate and free will. The curse that had long gripped the town loosened its hold, not through magic or legend, but through the courage to love despite uncertainty. The path ahead was not without challenges, but for the first time in years, hope blossomed vivid, resilient, and undeniable. And as the coastal breeze carried their whispered promises into the night, the town itself seemed to breathe anew. Its foundations no longer threatened by the fragility of broken vows, but strengthened by the enduring power of love. Yet, even as the warmth of newfound trust settled between them, a quiet question lingered in Luca's mind, a question that would shape the final steps of their journey. Could love truly overcome the weight of fate and the scars of history? The answer, he knew, would reveal itself in the days to come, as the town and their hearts continued to heal together. With fingers entwined and spirits entwined even more deeply, Luca and Elena stepped forward into that uncertain future, ready to embrace whatever it held together. The twilight sky stretched wide above the coastal town, painted in hues of soft lavender and deepening gold. Luca Moretti stood beside Elena on the balcony of the oldest house, their masterpiece, now fully restored. The building had once been a symbol of heartbreak and despair, its walls crumbled by the weight of lost love. Tonight, it stood tall and proud, a beacon of resilience and renewal. The salty breeze carried the gentle murmur of the town below, where laughter and music filled the air. Families and friends gathered in the square, their faces alight with celebration. The curse that had haunted the town for centuries, the invisible force that tore down homes and hearts alike, was broken. Luca's gaze swept across the scene, children chasing each other near the fountain, elders chatting animatedly on benches, and couples sharing quiet moments under the lampposts. The buildings, once fragile and crumbling, now glowed with fresh coats of paint and sturdy stone. Vibrant flowers bloomed in window boxes and along the cobblestone streets, tended carefully by the hands of the townspeople. Elena squeezed his hand gently, her eyes reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. "We did it," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "The town is alive again, and so are we." Luca nodded, swallowing a lump that had lodged itself deep in his throat. The journey had been long and painful, every nail hammered, every beam raised, carried the weight of memories both tender and tormenting. Yet here they were, standing together, proof that love could endure beyond heartbreak and ruin. Behind them, Marco Vital approached, carrying a small, weathered box tied with a faded ribbon. His usual stoic expression softened as he joined the couple on the balcony. "I found something," he said, carefully opening the box to reveal a bundle of aged letters and a delicate locket. From the original lovers, the ones whose tragedy began this curse. Elena's breath caught as she traced the fragile handwriting on the first letter. The words echoed the pain and hope they had come to understand so intimately. Promises made and broken, dreams shattered and mended. The parallels to their own story were undeniable. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked up at Luca, who reached out to tuck a stray curl behind her ear. "Their love wasn't perfect," he murmured, "but it was real, and it changed everything just like ours." Sofia Bellini called up from below, her voice warm and inviting above the din of the crowd. "Dinner's ready. Come celebrate with us." The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and homemade pastries wafted through the open windows of her cafe, mingling with the salty sea air. Inside, the tables were filled with smiles and stories, the community woven tightly together by shared hardship and healing. Luca and Elena descended the stairs hand in hand, their hearts full but cautious, aware that the path ahead would still demand courage and trust. Isabella joined them at the cafe, her youthful energy a bright contrast to the solemn lessons of the past. "You've changed everything," she said, eyes shining with hope. "The town, us even the future." Luca smiled, feeling the weight of his vow fulfilled, yet sensing the fragile nature of their newfound peace. "It's only the beginning," he said, "but together we'll build something lasting." As night fell, the coastal town shimmered beneath a blanket of stars. The curse, once a shadow looming over every broken wall and broken heart, had been lifted by love's steadfast embrace. Luca and Elena stood side by side, architects not only of stone and timber but of renewed faith, passion, and the promise of tomorrow. And in that moment, amidst the ruins transformed into homes, they found the strength to believe that love was the true foundation, unbreakable, enduring, eternal. The gentle crash of waves against the shore echoed softly as Luca and Elena walked along the edge of the now peaceful coastline. The rebuilt town behind them was alive, vibrant, humming with the energy of a community reborn. Yet beneath the surface of celebration lay the bittersweet memory of all that had been lost, of vows broken and hearts shattered. The story of the town was one of ruin and repair, of pain and hope intertwined like the twisted roots of the olive trees that dotted the hills. Elena paused, her fingers tracing the delicate petals of a wildflower growing near the sand. "Do you ever wonder," she asked quietly, "if the curse could ever come back? If love might fail again?" Luca looked down at her, a soft smile touching his lips. "Love is fragile," he said, "but it's also fierce. We've seen how it can destroy, but also how it can rebuild. The curse was never about the buildings, it was about us. About whether we could choose to trust again." She nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle deep inside her. "Then we keep choosing. Every day." Together, they turned back toward the town, where lights twinkled like stars and the laughter of children filled the air. The past was a shadow, yes, but it no longer held the power to break them. The architect of broken vows had become the builder of new promises, and with every step forward, the town's heart beat stronger, full of life, love, and endless possibility. Even as the night deepened, the celebration continued. Stories were shared around fires, music filled the streets, and the bonds between people grew unbreakable. Luca and Elena found themselves beside the fountain in the square, the water sparkling under the moonlight like scattered diamonds. To love, Luca toasted, raising an imaginary glass. To hope, Elena replied, her smile radiant. And with that, the town once cursed, once broken, embraced its future, built not just of stone and mortar, but of hearts mended and dreams reborn. The architect of broken vows had finally found his masterpiece.